All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming back to another iteration of the TPE Academy. Today, we're going to be talking about networking strategies. We know that this is really important, especially as conference season is upon us, especially as placement week is coming. We really wanted to give you all just some tips, strategies, and some of our thoughts around networking and the power that it holds. Just to give an overview of the presentation that we're going to give you today. First, we're going to talk about some networking basics, maybe a little bit of networking 101, give you some basic understanding of, from our view, what networking is, what it consists of, what's important. From there, we'll talk about how to prepare for networking and what that looks like. From there, we'll talk about expanding your network and then leveraging LinkedIn. And then at the end, all three of us, Julie, Steph, and I, will kind of talk to you about our personal thoughts, maybe some tips, our own experiences with networking, so you can see what this looks like in real time. So I will pass it off to Julie.
All right. So networking 101, right? So go up to someone, have the conversation, find connections. Who do you know right now and who shows up for you? So for me, I think networking is about being in the right place at the right time. Before this meeting, we were talking about how people do it differently, right? If that's for you, networking with people you know, talking to them. What I try and do is find somebody I don't know. I looked at a schedule for a conference I'm going to next week. I try to attend conference sessions where I don't know the people so that I'm building my network, I'm growing, I'm seeing other perspectives or a connection of a connection so that I still have a personal connection, but I'm seeing what those within my network have learned that I haven't been exposed to yet. So are you going towards your interest and are you going towards what's going to best build a different perspective?
So when we think about networking, we wanted to drop just a few statistics. So these are general, not necessarily particularly specific to the field of student affairs, but probably equitable. So in general, we see that networking leads to job offers. There's a lot of statistics. You can kind of do your own internet search on how many jobs are not always posted. I would say from my experience in higher ed, that's not always the case. You typically will see them posted. But sometimes what your network does is they give you that inside opportunity before it's posted to let you know, oh, this is coming. If you're interested, let me know. We can kind of present you as a candidate. 85 is a pretty high percentage rate of jobs that are filled with personal and professional connections. Now, I want to remind you that that doesn't mean you have to know everything about a person. It's a connection. So connection doesn't have to mean you've sat down, you've known this person for years. Sometimes it means you just had a really meaningful conversation with this person at a conference. You both connect over different development theories, or you both connect on some of the work that you've done similarly. So focus on this piece of connection and focus on that being as deep as you need that to go to find a connection. We all have different personalities. We all have different ways that we connect with people, and recognizing that those connections are going to be not necessarily one way or the other. So how you might connect with a colleague might be very different than your peer. And so just keeping this statistic in mind that connection is important to others. This doesn't say this has to be a person that works in student affairs. Doesn't have to be a person that works in your field. So that's important to consider, that even though you might be in the world of student affairs, you might have some connections that work in a completely different field, but know your work ethic and they've worked with you before and they can advocate for you and they have a friend that works in student affairs. So also keep in mind that this is not 80% of student affairs positions are filled with student affairs professions, personal or professional connections. This is more general than that. And networking is more general than the field of student affairs. People connect. That's a basic human need. And we tend to want to hire people who we find those connections with. I can say that as a hiring manager. And then as person who has applied for positions and accepted them, I want a position that I connect with people. So thinking about this little blurb at the top that employees who are hired via connections or referrals tend to stay longer and become an important part of the company. That's also pieced into this idea that references, referrals, like they can be longitudinally better. You can find more success both as an employee and then as a hiring manager, you can see that success and you can help that employee grow. So thinking about this 70%, also just to note that employers do search candidates. And so having a really positive social media presence, we'll talk about LinkedIn today, can be really helpful. Being connected with people on LinkedIn, having conversations, seeing what people are doing on LinkedIn can be important. And so we'll dive into that a little bit later in the presentation.
All right. So next we're going to talk a bit about what to have prepared, right? Networking can look different depending on the circumstance situation, right? You may be having an intentional, hey, let's meet for coffee kind of conversation at a conference, or it may be a one-off conversation. You may have attended someone's presentation and wanted to follow up with them about some type of remark that they made in the presentation. So it's important to know uh, just how to be prepared as prepared as possible when entering into those spaces. So one, it's important to know the networking purpose. So what do you want to get out of this connection, right? Are you simply wanting to um, connect with someone that works at an institution that you may want to work at? Are you wanting to connect with them because they are in a position that you would like to one day hold? Are you wanting to connect with them because maybe their path and their journey looks similar or different to yours? You want to know more about that. So whenever you're starting these connections with folks, it's important to ask yourself, what do I want to get out of that connection? The next thing to do is your elevator pitch, right? We talked in the very first session of the TPE Academy about building your brand and understanding who you are as a professional, what you bring, what you hope to get out of your career. This is the time when that starts to shine, right? Um, you will be able to kind of throw your information out there at a person so that in a as quick a way as possible, they know what it is that you're hoping to gain, what you can bring to the conversation, and where to kind of lead the conversation from there. So really start thinking about it doesn't have to be some overly rehearsed, super prepared um, thing, but if you just know, here are the key points about myself that I want to mention in this conversation so that this person and I can have this conversation. That's really important to prepare ahead of time so that you feel as confident and comfortable in that conversation. Excuse me. The next thing to prepare is, who are your connections? Are there people that this person is connected to that you share in common? Is there an institution that they worked at that you also worked at? Did you all go to the same undergrad institution, right? There are ways to understand how the person you're talking to may be connected to you in other ways that can give you all, again, more things to talk about in your conversation. Um, so it's really important to think about, who is my network? Like, map it out. These are the people that I'm connected to, and these are the people that they're connected to. So you can see that it is this wonderful web of resources, knowledge, and talent that you're connected to. And you're a part of this kind of group of really cool people that can help build each other up. And then finally, know your boundaries. It's important that you do not overshare personal information in these spaces. It is okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be honest. It's okay to be transparent. But there always has to come a line in which you are still maintaining those professional boundaries that you set for yourself and your brand, right? Um, it's not important to, trash an institution that you worked at. It's not important to maybe trash a former employer or something like that. It's um, all in the way in which you, again, are using this conversation to be something that's edifying you and not necessarily tearing down or doing anything that's antithetical to what you're there for in that conversation. So just really think through where that line is for you between being, again, transparent, your authentic self being great, while also maintaining those boundaries so that you and the person are not in a space where you are uncomfortable or getting into territory that's not the greatest. I'll pass it on to Steph.
All right. I mentioned we were going to talk more LinkedIn. Let's talk about LinkedIn. So hopefully you have a LinkedIn account. If you don't, I would encourage you to consider getting one. From my experience, LinkedIn is used like relatively heavily within the field of higher education. It's used in a lot of different ways. So if we come back to this bit of connection piece, we're going to talk about a few different ways you can think about using LinkedIn. Maybe you have one, you don't quite know how to navigate it. Maybe you don't have one, you're trying to understand what the value of LinkedIn could be. Now, just to be clear, this is just a few different ways. There's a ton more ways that you can use LinkedIn, and talking to people in your network about how they use it and how they find success is just one thing you can do. So I wanted to mention a couple of tools, in particular, the alumni search tool, and then searching connections through organizations. So there's a couple of screenshots on here. So the alumni search tool is when you go to a school, your alma mater, perhaps, but being that we work in the higher ed sphere, you might also think, okay, well, I want to go look at people or alums from a school who may have a third-party connection. So this doesn't have to be just your alma mater. That might be a good starting point to look at this tool. So you would go search for the institution on LinkedIn, and then the screenshot that says alum, so that's on your screen on the top left or right, depending on how you're seeing this from your screen, but it says home, about, posts, jobs, and alumni. And so you're going to click on that alumni tab under the institution, and then you're going to see whatever institution, how many alums are on LinkedIn. This is not how many alums are at the institution, it's just how many are on LinkedIn. And you can see where they work, where they live, all those things. You can search in the alumni tool by position title, you can search by institution. There's so many keywords you could use. You could search by like advisor, career services, housing, residence life, conduct, if you're looking for someone who works in those areas. So this is a good tool if you're trying to build connections or find people that work at institutions who are alums that work in different places. Now, this is just a tool to start to get your network expanded. See who's out there, see who's posting, see who's active, what's going on. The other tool is to look through an organization rather than necessarily an institution, but in our field, it might be one and the same. So just be mindful. Some institutions might not necessarily be recognized as an employer per se, so they might not have this people, which replaces alumni for an organization. So it will just kind of depend on how this is classified on LinkedIn to see what you're going to get when you search this. So there's either going to be that alumni or people, and it's again the same kind of method. You can search for names, you can search for institutions, position titles, and you can look up third-party connections. LinkedIn does a really good job of telling you, there's a soft connection between you and another person, or you have a third-party connection, which means it's going to be easier for you to potentially get connected to that person, or you can reach out to the mutual person that you both know. So this is another reason why it's helpful for most of the people you have on LinkedIn to have some kind of connection with them. So if you needed to reach out to them and ask if they could connect you with someone, they in general have an idea of how you or why you're connected to this person, where that connection comes from. Could just be simply a position title being similar. You can also find postings, so you can see opportunities through postings and connections. And a lot of people, from my experience, post opportunities on LinkedIn. So that tells you who the hiring manager is or a person that you could reach out to if you had questions. It's always good before you apply to reach out. I always recommend reaching out, making yourself known to that person, especially if you don't know them, you don't know anyone, and just, saying, hey, thanks for posting this. I'm interested. Sometimes that doesn't come to fruition, but sometimes it does. Some people are open to that, and some hiring managers, they're not. So again, that's that's from my perspective. It doesn't hurt to get yourself known, but I also think in the same sense, some people don't choose to do that. And I think you just make that call based on the field that you're working in, based on what you'd like to do. And then you can see what people are doing. So you can post about events and accomplishments. You can celebrate others too. So that's how you get on sometimes other people's radar on LinkedIn, is celebrating and getting, hey, great job, congratulations on your certification, congrats on a great event, and then posting events that you've done so people in turn can kind of see what you're doing. All right, so now we're going to move in. We're just going to talk a little bit about just our different perspectives on networking. We all have a bit of a different approach. So I think you'll get to hear some diversity in how we approach this.
All right. So from the committee, this one is me. Not all connections have to be part of your network. Like I said, when I'm looking for a job, I don't lean on people I know. I think I have quality connections. I don't want them to be the people giving me a job, right? I want to expand my network. I want to talk to people outside of my network. Like we talked about, Steph just referenced, a lot of people before you apply, if you know someone, you reach out. I don't do that. I don't do that, A, because of HR regulations and the schools I want to work at, the people would get in trouble. No, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I don't want it to be, oh, that's my girl. I want it to be completely unbiased. I want it to be the quality of the relationships I have and the references I'm being given outweigh the quantity, right? I want to have quantity, but I want that quality of what people see, who I am, on the internet, who I am in person, all my good, my bad. I want people to know exactly what they're getting and the people in their networks for them to call upon and hear my thing, who I am, exactly who I am. Don't be afraid of someone who may challenge you. I think I look for people who I know are going to expand my network, give me a bigger skill set, people whose resumes far outweigh me, colleagues who are far more successful than me. And make network connections can often be or become mentors. I don't look for mentors, right? I had a supervisor once tell me to ask someone to be my mentor. And I was like, what does that look like? Because I've never needed to do that. I've never intentionally gone up to someone except for during a job search and said, I would like to be mentored to you by you, because for me, that's weird, right? That's something that I didn't need to do because I just worked for people. And then that would naturally occur, where I would be a connection of connection. And they would see my work and we would have a conversation and they would want me, or vice versa. And so that, in and out would occur. And so I think sometimes who you choose, right, is who chooses you. Are you keeping that? But are you keeping it casual? Is that how you do it? Because that's how I do it. But if not, make sure something that I've always been told is your thank you notes when you interview with someone, whether it's higher ed or outside. But for me, a lot of what I do is very personalized thank you after interviewing. One-on-one, this is what we talked about. This is what I think of you. This is how, what I got out of this conversation, whether the outcome is positive or negative. Thank you for this conversation. Because you're going to see people who don't choose you, right? You're going to see people who do. You're going to move on. And how can you keep that network strong?
So I don't know if you wanted to go next or me.
You go for it, Andre.
I think that in my, I guess, younger years, networking was something that I think I felt a lot of stress around because in my mind it looked like it all had to look a certain way. It looked like, again, at the big conference, going up to, some VP or some director and saying, hey, OMG, I want to be you. How do I get to where you are? And I think what I've learned along the journey is that it doesn't, like we said earlier, it does not have to look any one specific way. I think as a person who is a little more on the shy side, I would never in my life feel super confident to like run up to some stranger and say, "Hey, I know you, let's chat." I think that I've had to be strategic in how I position myself in places to build the connections without having to put myself in situations where I know that I won't thrive, right? I know that if I go up to someone and try to initiate some type of conversation, it will be awkward. I will start stumbling over my words. Things will go south very quickly. And so what that's looked like for me, one is like, again, utilizing the connections that I've already made. Thus far in my career, right, I've been connected, luckily, to some phenomenal, phenomenal people who also know some phenomenal people. And through my talents, my abilities, right, people have just naturally said, "Hey, I know this person I think you should connect with." And then they are then utilizing their network to help me benefit from just their knowledge and their experience, right? I think that's great. Um, I think that it's also been really important that I try to position myself in ways where like there are opportunities that are already created for me. I just need to step through the door, right? When I was in my like first year as a hall director, back at an institution before the one I'm in now, there was a diversity leadership mentoring program that was created, right? And I was like, yeah, this sounds like something that's up my alley. Let me sign up. And from there, like the VP of Student Affairs, the director of the Career Center, the dean of students, like all these like big powerful people were now in my email inbox asking to grab coffee, asking to connect with me because I signed up for that, right? So here I am speaking and talking to these people who I, am learning so much from, and I didn't necessarily have to do the let me go and go up to this person and ask them to have coffee with me at NASPA, right? So I think that there is beauty in taking advantage of the opportunities that are created for you. What I think that means is that institutions and companies have to then create those opportunities for folks, right? That's important to ask in the interviews, right? Does this institution have in place some infrastructure that allows for either peer-to-peer mentorship, networking connections, or connecting with people that are a bit higher than you, right? Now, I think by nature of my role that I've moved up kind of the ladder, so to speak, in a way, I find myself just naturally in these conversations with folks. And then from that, again, it's a jumping point. You use the connections, the opportunities that you're given to jump into kind of a next thing. Um, and then I'll also hit on something Julie mentioned that I think is great is like utilizing the interview experience as a way to build network, right? Even if I don't get a job offer, even if I get a job offer and I don't accept it, I've met some great people along the way through my experiences through TPE, through my experience with just one-off job interviews for jobs that I've applied places. Um, just because it's a no to the professional opportunity does not mean that there's not a possible connection and networking opportunity there. So um, I'm a fan of the idea of unless the bridge is like literally crumbling, don't burn it, right? If you can keep a connection with someone, if you can, even if you don't talk to them every week, right? There are people who, one, they can bring your name up in spaces where in rooms that you're not in. But there's people that can just keep you in the forefront of their mind when opportunities come up or when things come up that they think will be beneficial to you. So it doesn't have to look like the movies say, right? You don't have to, go up to some big shot executive at Panera and ask them for their life story. There are ways that you can build your network and connect through less stressful ways for someone like me. And I'll end there.
Yeah, that's great. Wow. I have to like wrap up after all these things. Oh, okay. I agree with everything Julie and Andre said, and I'm going to come at networking from a perspective of a lot of things that get felt during networking, and there's a lot of opinions, and there's a lot of people that are going to tell you all these different ways that you do things. There's also going to be a lot of this feeling of maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome when you're trying to network or thinking, oh, I don't know if this person wants to connect with me. I don't know how I feel about, myself, my accomplishments. So there might be a lot of doubt, but really taking a step back and remembering that you are your own advocate, and networking is about advocating for yourself. And just be mindful that when you're not having conversations and other people are having conversations about you, they're advocating for you based on how they know you. So just being mindful that if you're not communicating your interests, your needs, like if you're not letting someone know how you want to show up in a space, when you have that opportunity, again, it doesn't have to be every single person, but being mindful when you're having a conversation that is going well, how are you presenting who you want to be? And again, there's no perfect way to do this. Sometimes we have our days. I do for sure. But just recognizing one of the pieces of advice over and over is that people don't know what you need. People don't know what you want. And so if you don't share those things, if you don't advocate that you're looking for a job, if you don't ask for help, people are really busy with their own lives. And it's not because they don't want to help you, but sometimes people just think you're doing great. Right? So it's a compliment. And I'm going to help you, hopefully help you think about networking from a perspective of just always leaving an open door for the possibilities. And it's great to network when you literally aren't looking for a job, when you're just looking to connect with people, because it's so much less stakes. Sometimes we put so much pressure on, like, we have to network to get a job, but sometimes just making a connection or making a goal for yourself that's doable. So maybe if you're a person that's really easy for you to connect with people, maybe your goal needs to be around having deeper connections rather than lots of connections. And maybe if it's hard for you to just find connections, maybe it's like, okay, I'm going to get one connection with a person who we can really find some values in common. And so just making that goal equitable to where you need that to be for yourself, and trying to take a little bit of the pressure again off yourself and just think about it as, I'm connecting with another person. There's nothing you have to lose. It's just a conversation. It doesn't have to have an output at the end. Of course, that can be nice, especially as most of you watching this are in the space of trying to find, but just continuing this mindset around, it's just a conversation, much like sometimes an interview can just be a conversation. You're just advocating for yourself. You're just sharing your accomplishments in the context of someone as an employer. So I think just reminding yourself to advocate for yourself, and then just checking in with yourself as you're going through this networking process. Kind of like we said before, there's people that just, it's not seeming to find that connection, or maybe your boundaries seem to be getting pushed a little bit. Just check in, tell yourself, maybe this isn't a connection I want to continue to foster, and move on. I think the other biggest thing is just be open to connections. Sometimes when we're very closed off, we're like, oh, I have enough connections. Sometimes we can miss opportunities that maybe a person really wants to connect with you because they just want to learn more. They want to gain some knowledge from you. It doesn't have to be about anything more than that. Just again, that connection piece. So hopefully all of these words give give everyone some ideas for how you can kind of build your persona in networking. And I think unless we have any more thoughts from our group, we're going to close this out. And we just want to say thank you for watching along with us. We'll have one more video for you coming up that's on negotiating from some experts in the field. So that's around salary negotiation, all those fun things that can sometimes be challenging for us to think about, how do we approach that. So we definitely encourage you to watch that, and then find us at the Placement Exchange Week. We're going to be around in multiple spaces, and we'd love to have further conversations with you if you connected with one of our different views on networking, or as we've talked about multiple things. And Julie, Andre, you want to say anything else? We close?
No, I'm good. Thank you all so much for watching these videos. It means so much to us. And again, like Steph said, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to connect at placement week or in other opportunities if you ever want to chat.